Hey folks, it was great to meet everyone in the first few weeks of our course. We wanted to start going a little bit beyond the material available in our textbook to kind of supplement it a little bit to match some of your own interests. So we're going to start doing these kind of snapshots, these LT 2010 snapshots every few weeks or every week if we're up for it. And we're going to have some discussion about them in the course, right, on our discussion forum. So first one, really relevant and related to the first few chapters of our textbook is focusing on the possibilities and challenges of learning at scale. So what I'm really going to do in these snapshots is share some stories that I've been part of in the hopes that it will facilitate some discussion for each of us on our discussion forum. So I want to begin with this map. You can take a second and try to guess what the heck it is. This is a heat map of students enrolled in one of the first massive open online courses, or MOOC for short, M-O-O-C, for those who haven't heard that term, back in, I believe, 2010. This course was titled Leading Strategic Innovation in Organizations. It was 6 weeks long, kind of focused on business strategy, creativity, innovation, how to foster that in organizations, led by a fantastic professor at Vanderbilt University called Professor David Owens. Certainly look him up. He's absolutely incredible. So this heat map shows all the students who were enrolled in the course. And so kind of a first question is, well, how many students do you think were enrolled in this course? You can kind of take a moment to think about that. The heat map, it's not the best kind of map to show it, but you can make a guess. 10,000, 100,000, 500,000, 50. About 79,000 were enrolled in the course, right? And so I like to point out a few things, right? Even though this is back from 2010, a really interesting thing is that, in a lot of these early MOOCs, all the maps of student enrollment looked almost identical to this, right? Everyone was looking at these heat maps of people who were enrolled and not enrolled, and they all kind of look like this. So you can kind of guess, well, what areas have access to these types of courses? What areas of the world don't have access? How do you even locate someone in terms of where are they when they're enrolled? And what the heck does enrolling in a free, open, massive open online course actually mean, right? You could think about that a little bit. A different type of course than what we're doing at Georgia State here, right? In our LT 2010 course. Next question, how many folks, how many of these 79,000 students do you think watched one video in the course, right? So they enrolled, they literally clicked the button and enrolled in the course. How many of them actually watched one video? So the course was comprised of, videos each week of the 6 weeks, and students had to do assignments and other types of things around those videos. How many watched one video? All 79,000? 50,000? 200? 20? So I get, when I do this with, real people, you get all sorts of guesses. So the actual number was 23,000 watched a video, right? So, a lot of folks asked back then and still ask, when you enroll in these courses, particularly when they're free, where did all the people go? Why did they even enroll? And there's various responses that we know some things, but the drop-off between enrollment and watching a video, actually doing something in the course, is significant and really interesting. Reflects possibly some challenges related to accessibility and some other things, right? How many students do you think made it through the first week? Right? So making it through the first week, you had to watch 5 videos, okay? And you had to do some assignments, right? So out of those 23,000, how many do you think made it through the first week? Right? Give you a moment to kind of contemplate that. The answer was 11,000, okay, watched 5 videos. So it halves that 23,000, right? We're really losing some students here. That's a big issue, right? 11,000 students make it through the first week. So what happened there, right? Some people actually watched a video and then left. You could ask questions, well, why is that happening, right? How many folks do you think made it through the course out of those 11,000? So that's a 6-week course, okay? 11,000 made it through the first week. Out of those, how many made it through all 6 weeks? Right? Usually there's all sorts of guesses now. Well, maybe half of those, 5,000 made it through, maybe 2,000, maybe 500, right? So the actual answer is about 5,000 completed the course, right? You could ask, well, is that a success? Is that not a success? How does that compare to other types of courses, right? How is that different? I don't know. Today, do we still get these same types of numbers? There certainly are still similarities, right? So you can kind of use this just really high-level statistics, or kind of really just high-level enrollment numbers to kind of start asking these questions. The last thing I'll say, there were 2 tracks in the course. One was a basic track of you just do assignments and complete. And the other one was actually you had to work in teams and do a design project. Much more intensive. It required collaboration, required a bit more work than just doing assignments, right? Much more real world. You're working in teams. You're trying to accomplish group projects. How many people do you think completed that track? So the answer is only 350 students completed that track, right? And so a lot of these early courses, certainly still today, have multiple tracks. And the reality is like completing group projects and teamwork around challenging kind of problems is a really tough thing to do online in these large courses, especially when people are spread out, right? And we're really dealing with that now, right, in our current environment. So just a few stories, okay, from one of the earliest massive open online courses. This story is certainly, I think many aspects of it are still really relevant to today. In a lot of things we're going through with online education. I'm going to, kind of use these questions here and shift a little bit. You could think about, well, what does learning at scale mean to you? A MOOC is one type of example of what learning at scale can be. Our course that we're doing now, we have about almost 100 students in it. We're a completely asynchronous course. You all are spread out across the country, across the world, right? Certainly kind of fits in with the idea of learning at scale. What does learning at scale mean to you? And then, of course, what are some of the possibilities and challenges, right? So I'm going to share a little bit more that will help us think about these questions and for our discussion this week. These are just kind of different definitions from kind of more academic, more folks who define these things. Well, learning at scale investigates large-scale, technology-mediated learning environments with many learners and few experts to guide them, right? There's lots of different types of these learning environments. There's massive open online courses like the one I was just talking about, intelligent tutoring systems, collaborative programming communities, community tutorial systems, Stack Overflow for those of you who do any kind of computer science, all sorts of communities around things like art, Reddit. I'm sure some of you are certainly experts in that, right? So all those can kind of fit into this idea of learning at scale, right? I kind of like this at the bottom. These depend upon large numbers of learners. And the longer these courses or whatever they are run, the more data they have to inform kind of future iterations of the course. So you can imagine like, the longer courses run, the more the teachers or the more kind of the computers that are running these types of things, the more data they have to kind of design for new students who are joining the course, right? So I just kind of like to share those definitions. You can kind of critique and question those, but they're worth knowing about no matter who you are, right? I'm going to share two projects, and then I'm going to kind of conclude with our framing our discussion this week. So the first project comes from a place nearby, Georgia Tech, Georgia Institute of Technology, and it's kind of titled A Teaching Assistant Named Jill Watson. So I'm going to let one of the leaders of this project, his name is Professor Ashok Goel, you're just going to watch a 1-minute video of Ashok, kind of talk a little bit about this, and then I'll answer some questions.
Today we have lots of classes with 100 or more students. Few students get personal attention. We even have these massively open online classes in which students learn from pre-recorded video lessons. Some of these classes attract 100,000 students, but only 10% or less complete it. Complete because lack of teaching assistance and personal attention. This raises a fundamental issue for us. Can we have personal attention at scale? What if we could give personal attention to every student when and how he or she needed it? Now, I think that would create an educational revolution. It would create an educational revolution because learning and teaching would become personal again.
So that's Ashok Goel. Professor Ashok Goel, you got to meet him there. Fantastic human being, cares a ton about teaching. What's he talking about? What he's talking about is the idea of building artificially intelligent teaching assistants, right? These are teaching assistants that are computers, right? Based on all sorts of machine learning algorithms. We won't have to get into that at all. The point is computers serving as TAs for students like yourselves, right? Fascinating idea, right? Why is he doing it? Because these courses are getting so large, it is so hard for human teachers and TAs to provide the feedback, the personal attention that students deserve and need, right? A really famous thing from his project, these are discussion posts from one of his really large classes that he teaches, right? In each of these posts, these are two different posts, right? I'm hovering over them with my cursor. A student poses a question. So on the left, is it the case that only basic problems have the problem text data available? And on the right, another student posts, is it permissible for Project 3 to be in a different language than Project 1 and 2 submissions? These are from computer science courses. So two different questions from two different students, two answers from teaching assistants. Can you tell which one of these answers is from a human and which one is from a computer or an artificially intelligent teaching assistant? Take 10 seconds, try to figure it out. Maybe take 3 seconds because I don't want to take too long. You can pause the video if you want. To be honest, I don't even remember which one is from the artificially intelligent teaching assistant and which one is from the human. And that's the point. It's almost impossible to distinguish, right? So the point here is this technology. In this case, this artificially intelligent teaching assistant is named Jill Watson. Shok and his team named her that. Certainly some questions and critiques around naming these types of things, but we'll avoid that for now. But what this is really showing is like the amazing possibilities that computers can provide answers at a rapid scale, immediate scale. Immediately when you post a question, you could have an answer at any time of day, no matter where you are in the world. And that this technology is starting to be developed in a way that can be used, right? So this is being piloted and used in quite a few courses over at Georgia Tech now, right? So I think it raises some interesting questions for us. Is persistence in a course like learning? So the goal of Jill Watson and other types of things is like to help you persist, to make it through the course. Like, is that all learning is? What data is collected about students like yourselves in these online courses to advance the design and the functionality of things like artificially intelligent teaching assistants such as Jill Watson, right? And so that was a computer science course. How would Jill work in an online course for pre-service teachers? Or another example that you could think of, right? So it works really well to answer pretty basic questions. Could it support discussion with other types of people? Could it do things that humans are particularly really, really good at? One answer would be, well, of course. Another answer would be, well, probably not, right? And think about other thoughts you might have, right? You could also think about a whole new set of technologies, for instance, that are being developed around how to address issues like plagiarism at scale. So again, Jill Jill Watson and Ashok's work and his team's work are really interesting because I think they point to some of the possibilities and also certainly some challenges that come out when we think about designing for learning at scale. I'm going to introduce you to shift gears, share another story, a very different one. From someone named Justin Reich. He's done a lot of wonderful work. He's over at MIT now, done a lot of work on online education, particularly focused around issues of equity. Diversity in online education. So this is an old video clip, but I still think it's great. I'm going to share it. This is Justin Reich talking a little bit about some things, and then I'll use it to wrap up and go into our discussion forum for the week.
If you believe that education is a civil rights issue of our time, is technology going to ameliorate or exacerbate those kinds of educational inequalities? That's what I've been trying to do with my research over the last 5 years, and I want to share a little bit of it with you. Here's kind of a simple schematic of the hypothesis of the ISTE conference. That as technology innovation goes up, learning, which we might define as the number of neurons in young brains being rearranged for pro-social purposes, goes up as well. Let's make this model a little bit more complex by thinking about educational inequality. So one scenario that we might imagine being true is one of closing gaps, that the widespread availability of free and open resources, of low-cost mobile technologies, will disproportionately benefit low-income students. That's the case that Sean from Qualcomm made yesterday. Another story that we might be able to tell is one of a rising tide. That actually, as it turns out, all of these new free innovations will probably disproportionately benefit affluent students because those communities have the human and social and financial capital to take advantage of new innovations. What I've tried to do in my research is gather some empirical evidence that would kind of test which of those scenarios is true.
So Justin Reich is really talking about quite a few things in that very short clip. He has done a ton of work since that's more recent, but he's really raising a lot of interesting questions. First, is education the biggest civil rights issue of our time? Just a good one to think about, right? What do you think about his definition of learning? Right? I mean, kind of put out an interesting one. And then the big point, of course, from his talk there is technology as closing gaps, right, between those who have privilege and those who are don't have access, who are from underserved communities, do not have the same privilege that certain communities and populations have? Or is it a rising tide? Technology can bring it all together in this wonderful new world, right? Of course, Justin and many others point out the dangers of things like MOOCs and things like other types of things, technologies online, in terms of privileging learners who are already privileged, right? So that's one of his biggest themes from this you should be taking out of. And I think the closing gaps and rising tide distinction he makes, you hear it over and over and over again in all sorts of educational technology work. He raises some interesting stuff if you watch the rest of this clip about how do you design for the margins. And he talks about some early work he did in wikis, and he leads into some of the more recent work around massive open online courses and other things. But between the story I shared in the beginning, from some of the things I've actually been a part of, teaching with Professor Dave Owens back over at Vanderbilt, was where that story was from, to a SHOT goal and the idea of an artificially intelligent teaching assistant, and to Justin Reich and some of these distinguishings between technology as closing gaps or rising tide, it really points to this larger question that we're going to tackle in our discussion forum this week that I hope you enjoy. And it's just going to ask you, what are some of the possibilities and unique challenges you are facing this semester learning online? Certainly feel free to go beyond that question if you like. The hope is many of you are experiencing very unique challenges that aren't just like, oh, well, technology is hard to use, right? You might have really specific things that we can all learn from. So I encourage you to share and answer that question, and we look forward to reading your responses. All right? Have a good week.